The Grand National on Saturday, it was delayed because of protesters, animal rights protesters. Now, at the snooker last night, play disrupted after a protester climbed under the table. Did you see this on TV? Spread orange powder over the table. Have a listen.
Oh. Well, these are terrible, terrible scenes here at the Crucible. Everybody trying to enjoy the snooker. I've never seen anything like this in 25 years of watching or working on the Crucible Theatre snooker.
Rachel Bossio is from the group that staged that protest, Just Stop Oil. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Well, you did it to get publicity, and here you're getting the publicity, but that must have been frightening for the people there last night.
What I think is really frightening is that the UK government is continuing to license over 100 new oil and gas wells, even though they know that new oil and gas is not compatible with human life. And that's what we're seeking to do, to bring attention to that issue.
So that would be the UK government, who have a democratic mandate in our democracy to do what they're doing. And if society wants to stop them...
does not have a democratic mandate. Nobody voted for him, so...
But Parliament does, and if anybody wants to stop the government doing things, the way our democracy works is we vote for MPs, and if those MPs then do things that we as society don't want them to do, we vote them out. Otherwise, you have the law of the jungle. Like, for example, you have people climbing over snooker tables.
Well, I'm doing a PhD in politics, and I can tell you that our government has a mandate if they continue to protect us. But what they are doing, they are not protecting us. And the social contract that we enter in with our government says if they're no longer protecting us, we no longer have to abide by their rules. So continuing to license new oil and gas is incompatible with human life. The UN Secretary General says that the real radicals are not climate activists. They are the government continuing to license new oil and gas. So I would say that's why we're doing this.
So you think the world should immediately stop the use of new oil and new gas, Rachel?
So it's new oil and gas licenses that Just Stop Oil is talking about. We're not saying to turn off the tap right away. We have in the UK about 8 years of reserves. So we would be able to use those reserves to make a transition to renewable energy, which is substantially, obviously, better for the climate, but also much cheaper.
And how did you decide to stage this protest last night? Who decided to do it?
So we're going to be doing cultural disruptions throughout the entirety of the summer to try to bring attention to this cause of no new oil and gas licenses. I'm not personally sure who decided to choose this particular event.
You're not sure?
I didn't choose it. I don't know. Right.
So that's how coordinated, how sophisticated this campaign is. You're not sure. Somebody somewhere decides to interrupt the World Championships. Someone somewhere.
Well, yeah, not every single individual person makes the same decision. Everyone works in different parts of the campaign, Stephen.
But within your...
how organisations work. Well, you don't make every single decision your programme does.
There's a boss here. There's a boss here, and we all know who's accountable for the decisions in the BBC. I guess what I'm asking, Rachel, is that if this is to get respect from the public, then the public should understand just how organised, how focused is this on climate change rather than
respect from the public. We don't care if people dislike us in Just Stop Oil. The suffragettes were the most hated people in their time. Martin Luther King Jr. was the most hated person in his time. Okay. We're not saying that Just Stop Oil is similar to that, but we're saying that Just Stop Oil supporters want to bring attention to this cause of no new oil and gas licenses, and it doesn't matter about being popular. This isn't X Factor. We're talking about the continuation of the human race.
But it matters about being logical and the campaign being coherent. So, is there a committee within Just Stop Oil?
Stephen, I don't really think that this is particularly relevant to talk about.
Well, you don't want to talk about it, do you?
Organization of the particular campaign.
Well, I think it's relevant.
What we're talking about is trying to bring attention to the greatest existential threat to humanity.
I know, but fair questions. Look, I know. Look, what your entity has done last night, what Just Stop Oil have done last night, Rachel, is that the motive is to get publicity. But it doesn't work that you then get publicity on your terms. It works that you're asked fair questions. And one of the fair questions, if you're interrupting national events that the public are paying to enjoy, is just how coordinated, how focused, how logical is Just Stop Oil as an entity, as an organisation. So how do you reach decisions? Is there a committee?
There are multiple different groups. We would describe it as a network. Everything is made in group decisions, but really I don't think that's the important thing. The important thing is that we are on, according to Antonio
You don't think it's
Gutierrez,
important to distinguish...
To climate hell.
You don't think it's important for the public to know whether you're just a group of anarchists or whether there's actually some type of genuine intent behind you?
We have intent. What we're doing is very clear. We are seeking to do cultural disruption, economic disruption, as well as disrupting actual oil fields in order to make this demand.
So how did you decide that it was...
Just Stop Oil.
How did you decide that it was right to target the snooker last night? Who decided it?
Supporters of Just Stop Oil are organised into various groups and committees, and there is a committee that does this, but this is not relevant.
So there is a committee.
Really pointless question.
So there is a committee.
I don't understand why you're really latched onto this word.
Because I'm trying to understand whether you're a group of anarchists who feel that you can do just whatever you want without any accountability. So if we don't know who's at the top, if we don't know who's in the committee, if we don't know how the decision is made, what are you going to do? Target a hospital next?
That's absolutely ridiculous. We are seeking to do cultural disruption because millions of people watch the snooker, but we need millions of people on the streets in civil resistance demanding that the UK government actually protect its people by stopping new oil and gas licenses.
And you think, do you, that by annoying, people that all they did was pay to go in and watch a sport last night?
I would say they weren't annoyed. I would say they were amused and entertained.
Amused and entertained. You don't think the people who were at the snooker wanted to watch the snooker?
They did watch the snooker and they watched this. I mean, I don't think that it's a zero-sum game.
You say you're doing a PhD in politics.
Mm-hmm.
What are you learning so far about democracy?
I'd say I've learned a lot about democracy because I also teach at the university on it. And as I've told you, we enter into a democratic state, it's a social contract between the people and the government.
Sure.
And the government has to protect you. If they are not protecting the people, then the social contract is broken, and it's up to the people to take power into their own hands.
And Rachel, when you're teaching your students, if the students disagree with you, are they entitled to, stop your lectures?
There's a difference between disagreeing and doing something that puts people's lives in danger. New oil and gas licenses are incompatible with human life. This is not just me saying this. This is the world's top scientists. This is the UN. This is even the International Energy Agency, the agency in charge of overseeing oil and gas. Everyone is saying that new oil and gas is not compatible with human life. So what do you expect us to do in this situation? Just keep our heads down and let the government kill us?
So you don't believe in the democratically elected government needing to make decisions?
The democracy in the UK is absolutely broken. That's just a standard, well-known thing. And
so if democracy is broken, Rachel, what should replace it?
We're not talking about that. We're not here to talk about democratic reform. We're here to talk about a specific issue, which is new oil and gas licenses.
But you see, because you spray powder over a snooker table, you don't get to dictate the terms on which you speak in the BBC. So spread that throughout your organisation. I'll absolutely try to understand why you're so motivated to do this. We'll do that in a moment. But if you're saying democracy is broken and the government's broken, what would you replace it with?
I mean, there are various different proposals put forward.
What are they?
Another campaign, Extinction Rebellion, wants to do citizens' assemblies where sort of regular, everyday people are able to make decisions rather than a bunch of eaten schoolboys paid off by big oil, paid off by big property developers who give $1 million contracts to their friends.
And how would those people be appointed?
Citizens' assemblies would work sort of like jury duty. Just regular people would be selected.
So different regular people would come in and out.
The point is We need regular people making decisions.
Okay.
We don't need rich, privately educated schoolboys who just give payouts to their friends who are in the pocket of big oil, big gas, and other big organisations.
And in the House of Parliament, because you're a lecturer, so no doubt you've done research into this. So in the House of Parliament then, Rachel, how many MPs are of a working class background and how many MPs have gone, as you've described it, to Eton?
I know that the large majority of them have gone to fee-paying schools.
How many?
Something like 80%. I don't have the number off the top of my head. This is not my specific research topic. I'm here to talk about no new oil and gas licenses. You can get an expert in democracy in the UK.
Sure.
That's not what I researched on.
But your point is you would replace the government now, so you wouldn't just disrupt.
But we're not talking about that. That's not what Just Stop Oil's demand is. It's to stop no new oil and gas licenses.
But because you spread powder over a snooker table, you don't get to dictate what the interview is. So the interview is about holding you and your organisation to account, and then, of course, we will talk about the issue as well. So a group of unknown people have decided, we don't know how they reached their decision, we don't know who else they're going to target, and Just Stop Oil want to get rid of the government now, and presumably want to get rid of the American government and all these other governments too.
It's like trying to create a conspiracy, Stephen. You can go to juststopoil.org and find information on how the campaign works. It's really not that difficult. Sure.
Okay. And when you say that new oil and new gas is dangerous, in what way? What is it doing to human health, Rachel?
It is dangerous. It's killing people. Oil and gas, I mean, this is ridiculous. You can just... Also, the world
but I want to.
New oil and gas is killing
sure,
people.
but I want to hear you articulate it because you're so passionate about this. So tell us what it's doing to us.
Well, I know that a recent scientific study, I think in the Lancet, said that burning fossil fuels is now killing more people than obesity. New oil and gas is also leading to extreme climate disasters, extreme weather events. I'm actually originally from California. And California is suffering from really extreme events. In January, there were 700 sort of extreme sort of rain and weather events in the state. There were 700 landslides as a result of extreme weather events in the state that were directly attributed to the climate crisis. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about millions of refugees. 33 million people in Pakistan were displaced as a result of flooding. So we're talking about death, but we're also talking about displacement. We're talking about extreme weather events, damage and destruction to property.
And there are coordinated decisions that have been made by many governments throughout the world to try to reduce emissions in a sustainable way, aren't there?
And the UK government is continuing to license new oil and gas, over 100 new fields, and
why do you think they're doing that?
Fields make all of the decisions completely meaningless because they will emit more.
Why do you think they're doing that?
What, licensing new oil and gas?
Yeah.
They're continuing to license new oil and gas because they get millions from oil and gas lobbies.
Can you name any?
You can find out this information. But
you're the
online.
spokesperson. You're the spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Can you name any?
I mean, honestly, you're just going down these weird conspiratorial things. Do you actually believe in the climate crisis, Stephen? It doesn't sound like it.
I'm trying to get a feel for your understanding.
Oh, you don't think I understand the climate crisis?
No, I'm trying to make sure the public understand how much you understand. So these millions of pounds that are being, covertly sent, are they, to governments? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm saying that the UK, literally MPs in the UK government get money from oil and gas. Priti Patel got a substantial payout last year. Just because I don't have memorized all of the names.
I haven't seen that about Priti Patel.
On this program half an hour ago. I don't have a fact sheet for you.
But you've been thinking about it for many months, presumably. You're a proper, legitimate organisation, Just Stop Oil. You're not just a group of anarchists. You're passionate about what you do, and you're doing it based on fact and evidence, aren't you?
Yes, we are doing it based on fact and evidence. I've told you the UK is continuing to license over 100 new oil and gas fields, knowing that the UN Secretary General has said that we are on a highway to climate hell and we cannot continue licensing oil and gas. So the International Energy Agency has said that 700 of the world's top scientists have signed a letter saying we cannot continue licensing no oil and gas. I can tell you that British MPs receive substantial payouts from sort of fossil fuel companies, from firms associated with them. Just because I don't have the specific names on the back of my head doesn't mean that this isn't true. You can find out this information yourself. I mean, all of this information is transparent. Nobody's trying to hide it. It's just organisations like the BBC don't report it.
Well, we are reporting it. We do report climate change, and I'm urging you. I'm giving you a platform to spread the information you have. Priti Patel, for example, did receive a £100,000 donation from a firm run by an oil trader. Kevin in Ballymena. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Stephen.
You can speak directly to Rachel.
Rachel, I think you have a slight problem. You're talking about gas and oil. What other form of heating is going to give civilization to heat the elderly, to heat the sick, to look after them? What are you going to do with that? And the other question I'd like to say to you is, you said you're from California. Would you not be better staying in California and clearing it up before you start sticking your nose in other countries' business, what you have nothing to do with? And if you are...
Well, she's quite entitled to live where she wants. She's entitled to be in this country as much as you are, Kevin.
I'm not disputing that, Stephen. What I am disputing, any person come on to... Actually, look, as far as I'm concerned, that's a terrorism attack.
Rachel?
That's a form of terrorism. Attack, what they've done in the snooker was a form of terrorism.
I think what you're saying is quite frankly ridiculous, but I will seek to repeat what I had already said earlier, which is that we are not saying to turn off the tap of new oil and gas. The UK have about 8 to 10 years of reserves that we would continue being able to use while we make the transition to renewable energy. Renewable energy is already able to provide substantial amounts of energy.
Hold on, Kevin, let's let her finish.
Back in California, for example, the entire state's energy on certain days is able to be provided by renewables. So we recognise that it will take time to build up the capacity, which is why we're saying no new oil and gas licenses and continue to use those 8 years of reserves. In terms of your second question, I've lived in the UK for 9 years. This is my home, and I have a right to hold the government in my home where I'm resident to account for what they are doing.
Fred and Lisburn next. Morning, Fred.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Rachel. I'm going to be quite frank. I'm a sports fan, and I don't want to see my sport penalised by a group of protesters, the same as the M25, tree huggers and all this here, blocking roads. You should be given one warning to leave the premises. If you don't, force should be made on you. Remove you. You have no place in society. If you are determined to ruin people's entertainment, people's fun, people's nights out.
Well, she's saying she's trying to save lives, future lives, Fred.
That is absolutely ridiculous, Stephen. How many people in the UK this year died of this? How many people? She won't even answer. Rachel, you won't even answer questions. You won't even answer fair, honest questions put to you. If you don't agree with our government, get out of the country.
I don't really think there was a question there, but I'd say I'm a sports fan as well. I play tennis, and we're doing this, just the Royal supporters are doing this to try to protect the things that we care about and we love, because we recognise that when society breaks down as a result of climate change, these sports and these activities won't be able to go on as normal. In terms of the damage in the UK...
Do you drive to the tennis, Rachel, or do you get a bus?
I take public transport and cycle, but I'm continuing to answer that in terms of what's happened in the UK. During the heat wave last summer, 40 houses burnt down. It was the busiest. 2 days was the busiest day of over 40-degree heat. Was the busiest day for the London Fire Brigade since the Blitz. The UK is suffering right now.
And
the UK will continue to suffer.
And the BBC is reporting, Fred, extreme weather events across the world. Already more intense across the world, threatening lives and livelihoods?
There's extreme weather events across the world. This is happening. It's not all the fault of the UK.
It's not all the fault of the UK. We live in the UK, and we're holding the British government to account.
Christine,
we do for you. I'll tell you what, keep your nose out of our sport. Keep your nose out of our country's politics. If you want to play silly girls' games, go somewhere else and do it.
It's nothing to do with it's nothing to do with sex. It's nothing to do with girls' games, for goodness' sake.
I, as a sports fan,
she's a woman.
Want to go and enjoy the sports, and I don't want them to be paying any more than I have to pay for extra security or extra this or extra that to stop a bunch of idiots, and that's all they are. A bunch of immature, spoiled idiots just interrupting my day and other people like me.
Well, where is your awareness of climate change, Fred? They're making you think, aren't you? They're making you think about it. They're making you.
Do you know something, Stephen?
Talk
They're
about
actually
it.
driving me more against it. I've been more against supporting people like this because they're disrupting people like me, people like you who want to go and enjoy a match or go to a motorbike racing or go to a tennis event, go to a golf event. They're disrupting us as sports
Are you saying
fans.
then
They're not hitting the government?
Climate change? You would like to have more extreme weather events in the UK because you hate dust up oil?
No, what I'm saying is people like your group would put me more against supporting people like you.
I mean, we said it's not a popularity contest. It's all about raising awareness of these new oil and gas licenses.
Christine Hamilton's listening this morning. Commentator Christine Hamilton. Good morning, Christine.
Stephen.
Good morning. Well, look, climate change, we do feel it. It's not just this abstract notion now. You see it. You see the extreme weather patterns. And Rachel and her friends and colleagues in Just Stop Oil, they say they're trying to save life.
Well, the climate has been changing for millennia. It really has. I mean, we've had times in this country when the Thames froze over and the climate has been, they go in and out of these huge cyclical dips, which are far greater than any human lifespan. So this has been going on forever and it is still going on. I don't know what Rachel, she says all scientists. That is completely untrue. I suggest she looks at something called the Global Warming Policy Foundation and she might find some facts which prove that not all scientists agree with her. And while she's talking about global climate change, why doesn't she go over to China, for example? They are building 250 oil-fired power stations at the moment, all over the world, not all in China. Why is she concentrating on a snooker table in this country? Snooker has nothing to do with it. It is utterly irrelevant. And she says she's just trying to get publicity. Well, yes, okay, we're talking about it. But that is totally wrongly focused. She should be focusing where it matters. Everybody understands that we've got to shift to domestic capability for energy production. We now have all the problems in Ukraine, and the UK has got to have a balanced mix. Yes, we are building wind turbines, etc., etc. We are now, fortunately, building more nuclear power stations, and we have got to continue doing that. You cannot rely on renewables when the wind doesn't blow, etc. Everybody knows that. We've got to have a balanced
Rich is talking
mix.
about the reserves we have.
Well, exactly, and we cannot afford not to use these reserves. I mean, Rachel is living in cloud cuckoo land. The government is simply trying to keep the lights on for everybody, trying to keep the economy going. If we suddenly stop all oil and gas and say, well, what a waste of all these reserves that are there. It's absolutely absurd. If she wants to pay even higher taxes than she's already paying, perhaps she isn't yet paying tax. Maybe that's one of the problems.
Well, let's let Rachel reply to you.
So thank you. So I think there might be a misunderstanding about the demand for Just Stop Oil, which is that no new oil and gas licenses. We're saying that these reserves absolutely should be used. 80% of the oil in the North Sea oil doesn't actually get used in the UK. It goes to the open market. So it's a complete fallacy to claim that this has anything to do with energy security. Renewable energy is, of course, able to be stored. So the whole sun not shining, wind not blowing argument is a complete fallacy. I'm trying to respond to you. The world's top scientists all agree on this. Of course, there are sort of fringe and conspiracy theorists, like the report that you cite. Quite frankly, I don't want to give that any attention. We're talking about the sort of biggest organizations, again, as I'm saying, the UN, the International Energy Agency, Sir David King, the former scientific advisor to the UK. These are the types of people that we are saying have come out to say that no new oil and gas. And I don't really want to respond to your strange personal comments.
Excuse me, what strange personal comment?
About my tax status. I mean,
no,
I do pay
absolutely.
tax.
Absolutely. No. I'm going to defend Rachel there. There's no question of Rachel's integrity in terms of what she pays in tax. She pays her full taxes, and that's not what we are on the programme to talk about.
I wasn't for an instant suggesting she didn't. I'm just saying that when the full reality of daily economic life hits people and they have to pay all their taxes and their bills, a little bit of reality sometimes comes into what I regard as a pretty naive view. And the idea that targeting snooker tables is going to have any impact. It just makes people utterly sick and tired of this.
It makes people talk about the issue, does it not? We're talking about it today.
Well, we are talking about it, but I don't think it highlights it in a very good way. And by the way, the suffragettes, you say you don't want to be popular. I think you want people to support you. There's a difference between people supporting you and being popular. You want people to support you, which means you shouldn't alienate them. And by interrupting sporting events like that and clogging up motorways, you alienate people, that's all, and throwing paint all over buildings, etc. It alienates people. And it is a democratic country, but you're not the only person with a vote. And Rishi Sunak does have a mandate. He is the leader of the party that won the last election. So he does have a mandate. That's the system we live in. I mean, you can't change the whole system overnight by throwing powder over snooker tables. So I just think it's a very, very naive view. And you're right, yes, we're talking about it. So to that extent, you have achieved your objective. You're getting publicity. But I just think most people will throw up their hands and think this is pretty naive.
Rachel?
Again, it's not a popularity contest. It's not X Factor. Just Stop Oil don't want to win anyone's love. What Just Stop Oil supporters want is support for the demand of no new oil and gas licenses. Go support Extinction Rebellion, who aren't disrupting the public. Go support Friends of the Earth. Go support Greenpeace. If a more sort of mild climate group is sort of more your flavour. But the big thing is about getting these issues out and talking about them. And I'm glad we're talking about them.
And look, the BBC is also reporting that left unchecked, there will be mass extinction. Humans and nature will experience catastrophic warming. Stay with me, Rachel. Stay with me, Christine. Here comes Mark's in Armagh. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Stephen.
That's what happened at that table. Another table, someone was trying to glue themselves to it.
Well, Stephen, I'm on to support Rachel's points. To be honest with you, I think people close their eyes and their ears off through fear of what's going to happen to the earth. And I'm on the supporter that we live in a massive island. We have access to waves and wind. So we have no need for renewables. No need for oil, sorry.
So are you going to vote on that basis?
I would, yeah.
So is that the way to do it? Is that the way to affect change?
Well, there has to be some sort of change. Otherwise, we're not going to have any earth.
And how quickly should we do it, Mark?
So the girls has detailed out there that they have 8 to 10 years of reserves. So why not put the infrastructure in place now? Now, the other lady that was on there has said about
Christine Hamilton. So Rachel Paseo, Christine Hamilton.
Yeah, Christine has been on there and says about the government, they're concerned about the economy, etc. Well, if they're so concerned, then why did they do a kamikaze budget? And it completely almost destroyed our economy in one day.
And the Prime Minister was ousted essentially as a result. She had to stand down as a result.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak was never democratically voted in to be the leader.
But he's democratically there because that's part of the process.
Therein lies the problem.
Okay.
The way politics works.
And Mark, if it's okay to glue yourself to a snooker table, there was an attempt made to do that. What is next? What's off limits for these people? You don't know who's made the decision. You don't know them. You don't know their background.
They're not putting anybody's life in danger, Stephen. They're trying to prove a point. If they get 10 people that it sinks into, it's been productive. But if we keep making that point and it keeps sinking into 10 more people and 10 more people, then, it's a domino effect. They'll talk to their friends about it. what they're doing is not putting anybody's life in danger. It's disrupting a game of snooker.
Christine?
Well, you say that, but that snooker is not important to me, let's be honest. But to a lot of people it is. And it is just a pointless protest. I mean, apart from the fact that we are talking about it, it's so difficult to know where to start, to be honest. Yes, of course, I accept your point about the domino effect, that if 10 people become convinced. But I just feel that Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, all these people should really use their brains and their powers in a rather less disruptive way. And I just don't think it's fair on other people to do this. I really don't. And I do suggest that Rachel, she shouldn't dismiss people like the Global Warming Policy Foundation. I can't remember exactly the word she used, but she didn't say cranks, but it was something like that. I suggest she should read more widely around the subject and not just accept at face value the facts and figures that she says that all scientists support, because they don't, and there are a lot of different opinions on all this. And nobody wants to continue churning out, environmentally damaging fuels of course they don't. This is why everybody is working towards a mixed energy economy, and at the moment we still need, in my opinion, in order to keep civilized life going. And let's not forget that because of the Industrial Revolution, Britain was leaders in all this, so we got all our economic advances hundreds of years ago. Other countries in the world, they still need to get those advances. And if we're going to deny them the chance to do that, and the chance to do that is, for example, by using the coal-fired power stations that China is building all over the world, who are we to deny other people in the world our standard of living? They don't have our standard of living. Why shouldn't they have our standard of living? And they're not going to get that at the moment from windmills.
To China. Why not be the country that's the benchmark to all other countries in the world, showing that we are diversifying? All the top scientists in the world, in their fields, all the top scientists in the fields of climate change are saying we are on the tipping point right now. We're on the tipping point of no return. So now is the time to make the point. So, how do you respond to that?
Well, Mark, thank you. Hold that thought, Christine. Paul in Belfast. Morning, Paul.
Morning, Stephen. Morning, Rachel. Rachel still there?
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
How you doing, Rachel? I support your organisation 100%. I'm frankly embarrassed by the commentary this morning that you've had to put up with, including from you, Stephen. Do you think that this programme has been balanced this morning?
I do.
You do?
You're on it, aren't you?
Yeah. And what? Why is there no one from the oil industry or the UK government on as a counter to Rachel? Why is Rachel taking the flak this morning?
Because Rachel is fronting the organisation which did the protest last night.
Yeah, you did the same with the trade union movements. You've had them on your show. You've given them a rough time. You haven't had any employers or anyone else. It's a one-trick pony all the time.
So it's such a one-trick pony. She's not a wee girl. Can I just... There are about 4 or 5... She's also not a girl. Her name is Rachel.
Rachel has taken personal abuse on your show this morning from old white bigots in this place.
So do you think people...
You have to question your own line of questioning to her. Why is no one from the oil industry or the government on your programme this morning?
The story this morning is whether protests how acceptable do the public find these protests, which are designed to disrupt. We saw it at the Grand National, we saw it at the snooker. I was talking to a protester, Paul, at the weekend on 5 Live, who said what they're going to do, and it wasn't Stop the Oil, it was an animal rights group, they're going to break in to animal farms, and they're going to steal animals and save the animals by stealing them.
That's not a new phenomenon, Stephen.
Well, but there is a legitimate...
Do you remember the bagels?
But Paul, there is a legitimate question around who decides what is right and wrong in terms of breaking into places, disrupting the snooker, stopping the Grand National. Who decides what's right? Well, why not? Why not?
Breaking in.
Why not?
I'm not condoning breaking in.
Why not? They do.
Stephen, can I tell you something? This programme supposedly is about protest this morning and the ability to protest. If you open a history book, you'll see throughout the decades that no change has happened without significant protest. The Berlin Wall, for example. Those people went against the elected government and got the wall pulled down. Even as recently as a few weeks back, when the people in Israel stopped the criminal Netanyahu from wrecking their judicial system. Nothing happens without protest. Nothing happens
But the interesting debate that's being had on the programme this morning is, where do you draw the line? What is an unfair protest, Paul? What is going too far? And if you don't know who's making the decisions, you can talk about history books all you like, right? And that's fine. I get it. I hear you. But who makes the decisions as to what is too far and what's not?
Stephen, people make decisions, as a collective. That's what a protest is. People, as a collective, make these things. You've only to look at the civil rights movement here in the north of Ireland. People came together in defiance of the government. Nothing changes.
Was it all right when people were lying on the motorways and mothers and fathers couldn't get their kids to school and to work? Was that all right?
I can't comment on individual.
Well, why not?
The individual circumstances that you're bringing up. I don't know anything about it.
Well, it was a big news story a couple of months ago. Some of the protesters were saying, look, against climate change or in support of people fixing the planet. And they were wanting to block motorways to get the government to act. Now, who gets caught up in that are people trying to get to hospital, all of our public services. But was that type of protest acceptable in your view?
Stephen,
if you can break into snooker, if you can disrupt snooker events, if you can try to stop the Grand National, can you lie in the middle of roads and stop you and I and everybody else getting to work?
I think strategically and tactically that was a poor choice of tactics.
But is it an acceptable form of protest?
Stephen, who decides what's an acceptable form of protest?
That's why I'm doing this debate this morning. That's what I'm asking you.
The British government are trying to curb protests now. They're giving the police additional powers to stop protests. Is that acceptable? It's supposed to be a democracy, which you were championing early on.
Which is why I'm asking you and us all, what is acceptable protest and what is going too far?
Stephen, what's going too far is what society decides.
So if a hospital is using new oil and new gas, will it be all right to block the hospital?
Absolutely not. Oh
why not?
Absolutely not.
Well, Richard, you say, oh my God, why not?
Just Stop Oil is a non-violent campaign group. Just Stop Oil would never do an action that was in any way or shape violent.
But you're telling me...
sort of bringing up this idea of a hospital is just this attempt to sort of sensationalise what's happened.
But Richard, one second. You're saying you would never do it, but you can't tell me who makes the decisions. You can't tell me how the decisions are made.
Decisions are made as a collective by multiple different groups.
By multiple different groups, teams. So you can't control. So you make my point for me. You can't control the different groups. There is no control of your organisation because they're different groups. It's why I spent the time at the beginning of this interview.
Democratic decision-making. I'm sorry, you clearly
or is it
don't
called
understand
anarchy?
Democracy because you keep banging on about the UK being a democratic state, even though, as our caller has just said, a democratic state does not put bans on protest. It does not seek to make trade unions
and by the way,
to organise.
The reason I stand over my question about hospitals, Rachel, is because when people were lying in the middle of roads in recent protests, ambulances were blocked. Ambulances were blocked. Ambulances were blocked. And fire engines were blocked too, weren't they?
No, they weren't. Just Stop Oil have a blue light policy where people always move for emergency vehicles. Stop spouting misinformation.
How do you move quickly if you're glued to the ground, Rachel?
You're talking absolute nonsense.
How do you move if you're glued to the ground?
Nonsense.
People make decisions in terms of who glues where so that there's always lanes open for fire engines. There are always lanes open.
Who controls that?
The people who go out on the action, they make that decision together.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have specific names. It's like you're waiting for me to say one particular name. This person makes all the decisions. That's not how it works.
I think if we go back to the beginning, and it's why I started the interview as I did, you've confirmed to us that there are different disparate groups no one group has control over the other, and there is an intent to disrupt society. And it might be the right thing to do, not for me to say. But there is no control from one group or the other. There is no named person in charge of any group. And therefore you can give no guarantee.
Authoritarianism is the only acceptable way to organise a group. Is that what you're saying?
Here's Andy next. Morning, Andy.
Morning, Stephen.
Go ahead, Andy.
No, Stephen, I was listening earlier to a couple of them male callers. I just couldn't believe sort of how selfish they sounded. It was all about my sports, and if I don't get to see my sports or my golf and all this here, I mean, like, do they not realise this has actually a worldwide problem? It doesn't really matter where in the world you're from. Everyone has an entitlement to have an opinion on it.
Christine Hamilton?
Well, of course, everybody's entitled to an opinion. What I think you were discussing, Stephen, on the subject of the programme is how far is it right to go? How much can you disrupt the lives of other people in pursuit of your personal objectives? I mean, it's a circular argument. It's an endless argument, and we'll never agree on that. But Rachel was talking about I think she called it the blue light policy, which enabled emergency vehicles always to get through if they were glued to roads and things. How does somebody who they are not an emergency vehicle, they're a private individual, but they have a life-threatening, they have somebody in their car, and if they don't get them to hospital, they will die. How do they make provision for that? How do they absolutely assure that pregnant women can get there to them? And there was one situation when a woman had to deliver her baby by the roadside because she couldn't get through one of these blockages. They don't account for all that. And the way you have described their organisation was perfect. It is anarchy.
I haven't described them as that. I've asked Rachel to explain to me how it's not anarchy.
The way you describe them is an almost exact definition of anarchy. There's nobody in charge. They're disparate groups. Nobody in particular making the decisions, etc., etc. It is anarchy, and if that's the way you want to operate,
or they're passionate citizens trying to protect our country.
Sorry, I missed that.
Or they're passionate citizens exercising their right to protest to protect the future generations.
Yes, of course, but the question is how far are they supposed to go? And Rachel claims to be a Democrat, which is why she complains that this government isn't delivering. I'm not quite sure how her argument flows, but she says, she if the government isn't delivering, she has a right to protest. Well, the question is, how far does that protest go?
It's called social contract theory, Christine. Social contract theory.
Yes, no, I understand the social contract theory. I went to university too a long time ago, but I do know what the social contract is. But everybody has a social contract with everybody else, and this is the nub of the question. How far can you disrupt the lives of other people? And is it fair to disrupt, on this occasion, a snooker tournament, which brings delight to millions of people? And, of course, that's why it was done, because millions of people presumably would be watching. Is that fair to your fellows?
Here's Robert Newton Abbey. Morning, Robert.
Good morning, Stephen.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to say to Rachel, you have to be careful with your group and like Extinction Rebellion. People who are on the line who maybe believe a little in what you're doing, you're bordering on extremism. And when people see extremism, they tend to treat you with contempt and switch off to your whole purpose and stop backing you. And the same goes for Extinction Rebellion. And the very people you spoke about, you're standing against this morning, actually are using you as a mechanism for what they're doing in your groups.
How are they using her? Rachel has her own mind, her own brain, her own.
They're sensationalising what she's doing, Stephen, and what the other groups are doing. So, as your other caller said, they can clamp down on people's right to protest. Now, we're talking about, you're asking where's the line drawn. If nobody's getting hurt and there's nobody being, injured or life lost or whatever through the means of protest, then surely that's all right. People have the right to protest in a democratic society.
So you can disrupt whatever you want. You can stop whatever you want.
Well, if you have a reason to do so and you believe in that reason so much, then you have that right. But what one of your other callers was making a point about was having a balanced show. We're kind of away off the mark here about, what this is all about is about the climate at the end of the day. And there's scientists out there, much like the argument that COVID was. There's those who believe, and quite rightly so, there's studies out there showing there isn't really a climate crisis either. This is all hypothetical.
There's no doubt that climate change is real. That it's not up for debate.
And where are you getting those facts from, Stephen?
The science is absolutely not up for dispute in terms of does climate change exist?
I'll give you one example.
Does climate change exist?
Norwegian
yes, it does.
Study. There's a Norwegian tree ring study where they studied the trees that were over 200, 300 years old that showed that there wasn't any increase in global temperature in that period of time.
So there is absolutely no doubt that climate change is real and exists. Now, John Wright...
So let's get all the science out. Let's get the debate opened up then.
Well, absolutely. John Wright is a Greenpeace protester in support of Rachel this morning. Morning, John.
Hello, good morning, Stephen. I do think I can help specifically on how Extinction Rebellion work on the action and logistics angle of things, how we make decisions and where we target.
So go ahead.
It's an 18-page booklet, and I can drop it into to reception, but I have a feeling that you'll sort of hand it to one of your producers and say, read that and tell me about it. Number 10 on the inside cover, it says, we're based on autonomy and decentralization. So, yeah, in a sense, strictly speaking, we're anarchists, but of a very benign kind. And I would...
So how do you distinguish between between a benign anarchist and someone who's not?
Well, like I say, I'm part of the decision-making process because it's consensus-based. And whenever we make a decision what to target, my own personal preference is for a smiles all around so that even whenever we target somebody, they end up with fair play to them. That was quite funny.
So we by doing things like what, John?
Here in Northern Ireland.
By doing things like what?
We did block a road in Newcastle and Bangor, and we complied fully with any instructions from the police. Also, the A6, we made a major demonstration there 2 years ago now.
But when you were blocking the road...
Again, in fully cooperation with the police.
Where did you say...
enormously.
Where did you say you were blocking the road?
Bangor and Newcastle.
And you say your approach is to bring smiles all round. So why were people smiling when the road was blocked?
Oh, they didn't. But that would be my personal approach. I mean, we had to make these consensus decisions, and both protests worked extremely well, got newspaper coverage, although it didn't get the kind of coverage that this fiasco today is.
So, John, coverage is it then, is it? That's the end justifies the means.
Yeah, in a brutal way, yeah, but that's not my preferred modus operandi.
And who controls what's too far and what's not?
The Action and Logistics Group have to make their own decisions based on our core values and principles, which is all laid out in this 18-page booklet called Planning Effective NVDA, Nonviolent Direct Action. It's very authoritative. It makes sure that we aren't head the balls, that we do things very measured and, like I say, non-violently. It's terribly important that we're seen as non-violent. Otherwise, we would totally blow our reputation out of the water.
And how is... When people have paid money, cleared diaries, looked forward to the World Snooker Championships...
the sponsors of the World Snooker. Yeah. That's important too.
The public. I'm talking about the public. Mm-hmm. So how is that not violent?
Oh, well, violent is interrupting...
To climb onto a table and glue yourself to a table, which means that nobody else around you has the choice of what happens next. How's that not violent?
Yes, it sometimes is difficult to connect the dots, but I think that the sponsors of large tournaments can have some effect on what the overall financial and PR aspect of around the oil and gas and fuel industries. We have to make a just transition. It's painful. Some people don't want to change, and we have to create awareness to create the political will, to create the political...
I think Harry, our caller Harry, wants to speak to you both this morning, John and sure. Rachel. Morning, Harry.
Good morning, Stephen.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, Stephen, this movement Why don't they put up someone to go before the electorate and stand in Parliament? We do live in a democracy, just to see what real support they have. Now, I have another one here.
Well, let's let Rachel answer that.
So I just want to say one thing quickly first, which is that there's a lot of sort of anger at why we're doing this, which sort of seems to sort of assume that Just Stop Oil has immediately started with this. That's not true. Everyone in Just Stop Oil has written letters to their MPs. They've signed petitions. They've tried to go through all of these democratic measures for years and years and years, and it's done nothing. The UK has continued to license more oil and gas, which is why things have escalated. The second point, in terms of why we don't support someone to speak to Parliament, is that I think Parliament would need to sort of reach out to us. Just Stop Oil is part of a sister group with groups all over the world called the A22 Network. And in Germany, actually, some of the city's mayors have agreed to speak to them about their demands. So it is working around the world in different places. It's just that in the UK, that hasn't happened yet.
Now, I want to make another second point to you, Rachel. You're so concerned about saving lives. I have a statistic here for you. Around 40 to 50 million abortions are carried out each year around the world. Does that concern you?
We're not here to talk about that.
No, of course you're not. Just what is your opinion on it then?
Well, Rachel wasn't asked to come on and talk about that. What's the point? What's the point you're trying to make, Harry?
That's fair enough, Stephen. But so concerned about saving lives, but not convenient to talk about the.
Well, we haven't asked. We haven't.
Abortions, that wouldn't go down well, of course.
And you're entitled to speak about what you want to, and Rachel is entitled to say that she was not brought on to talk about that. Christine Hamilton, final word to you.
Well, it was totally unfair to ask Rachel her views on abortion. She is definitely not here to talk about that, and they are, whatever her views are, they're completely irrelevant. The only thing I want to say is that nobody is what people derogatorily call a climate denier. Nobody denies that the climate is changing. It's changed for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. The key factor is what is the man-made contribution to that, and that is what all the argument is about. And one end of the extreme are those who want to shut down all fossil fuels instantly with grotesque impact on the economy, and there are those who want a more measured approach so that we do this gradually over the years, and that is the big question, is how we get from here to there. But nobody denies that the climate is changing.
Christine, thank you very much. Rachel, thank you for coming on this morning. The news at 10 o'clock. Coming up next.